This is a masterful debate takedown, one of the best you will ever see. First, we'll start off with Harry Reid when he decided to challenge Ted Cruz on Kate's Law.
The senator from the Democratic leader.
Thank you. The new mandatory minimum sentence this bill would create would have a crippling financial effect, and that's an understatement, with no evidence that they would actually deter future violations of the law. This legislation would require about 20,000 new prison beds, 20,000, 12 new prisons, cost over $3 billion. This is yet another attack on the immigrant community. The reason why this bill didn't go through the Judiciary Committee is because Republican senators objected to it going through the committee. In the House, Speaker Ryan says he can't trust the president to do immigration reform. And in the Senate, after passing a bipartisan bill in 2013, all we've seen from Republican leaders and their caucuses is bills that attack immigrants and tear families apart, so I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President.
The senator from Texas.
You know, I would note it is sad that the Democratic leader chooses to stand with violent criminal illegal aliens instead of the American citizens. But even sadder is that he impugns legal immigrants. When the Democratic leader suggests that incarcerating aggravated felons, murderers and rapists who illegally re-enter this country is somehow a slight to immigrants, well, Mr. President, I am the son of an immigrant who came legally from Cuba. There is no one in this chamber who will stand and fight harder for legal immigrants than I will. And for the Democratic leader to cynically suggest that somehow immigrants should be lumped into the same bucket with murderers and rapists demonstrates the cynicism of the modern Democratic Party, demonstrates just how out of touch the modern Democratic Party is. You know who doesn't agree with the Democratic leader? The voters of San Francisco. I would venture to say almost all of whom consider themselves Democrats, and yet they just voted out the sheriff for saying basically the same thing the Democratic leader did. For saying that the Democratic Party stands with violent felon illegal immigrants instead of the American citizens. And let's listen to what the Democratic leader just said. Gosh, it would cost too much to incarcerate aggravated felons who illegally re-enter this country. Mr. President, if it costs too much to lock up murderers, rapists, kidnappers, then you know what? We need to spend the money it needs to lock up every single murderer we can. I'm sorry that the Democratic Party doesn't want to spend the money to lock up murderers, and instead, apparently, it's cheaper to lose our sons and daughters. I think we have the resources to lock up murderers. And there should be no confusion where the party stands. The Democratic leader suggested that locking up aggravated felons is somehow disrespectful to immigrants. With all respect, as the son of an immigrant, I believe that immigrants who come here legally who aren't criminals should be treated markedly different from murderers and rapists, and yet the Democratic Party chooses to stand with the murderers and rapists and violent criminals. That is unfortunate indeed.
After that horrible whooping, for some reason, Dianne Feinstein thought she had the intellectual capacity to debate Ted Cruz as well. Needless to say, she was sent to the corner.
Since my name was also raised, or San Francisco's name was raised in his prior discussion, I would respectfully ask if I could make a few remarks about Kate Steinle and the situation that the senator from Texas has raised.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Respectfully, Senator, I do not believe that you know much about San Francisco. I'm a lifelong San Franciscan. I served the city as a mayor for 9 years, president of the Board of Supervisors for 7, and another 8 years as supervisor. I believe the city of my birth, my education, I know something about. The reason for the defeat of the sheriff is multifaceted. It doesn't just begin with one thing, and I want you to know that. With respect to the situation you spoke about, which is whether a local sheriff should in fact respond to the federal government request If that request is for a detainer, if that request is for a communication, I believe very strongly that that sheriff should do that. And was that part of the campaign of the sheriff that is going to be the sheriff-elect? I can't say with any specificity, but I can say that that's my belief. I think that going overboard and punishing everybody makes very little sense. So I am hopeful that the Department of Homeland Security, through its efforts with the PEP program, will be able to secure cooperation from the City and County of San Francisco. If it does not, then that is another story. But I believe the department is making headway in discussions with other communities that are in fact sanctuary cities. Since we're on the subject, in 1985 as mayor of the city, I was the first person to be sought out by the Archbishop, who asked for a brief reprieve or a reprieve for nuns from El Salvador. And that was the first piece of legislation. It was small and it was restricted to a country that was in a civil war with some terrible things happening. Since that time, the sanctuary concept has expanded considerably. And to some extent, I think far beyond what it should be. But I think the way to do this is through hearings and discussion among the members, and not with over-the-top rhetoric that moves visceral impulses, because we have to live, Senator, by the public policy we espouse, and we have to know that it's wise and prudent, and I deeply believe that. So I just wanted to clarify the record, and I thank you very much for allowing me to do so, and I yield the floor.
Objections heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
You know, I would note, with regard to Kate's Law, the senior senator from California just said that going overboard and punishing everyone is not something we should do. This is reprising the same theme the Democratic leader said, that somehow incarcerating aggravated felons is punishing everyone. As the son of an immigrant, I take offense at the suggestion from the Democratic Party that every immigrant is somehow an aggravated felon, incarcerating murderers and rapists.
Would
not punishing everyone.
Would the senator allow a question?
I would be happy to.
I don't believe there was anything that I said that related to our letting aggravated murderers and others who would reap great harm to our society. I do not favor that, and I would like the record to clearly reflect that.
I would note that the senior senator from California characterized Kate's Law, and this was a verbatim quote, as going overboard and punishing everyone. Kate's Law is targeted only to aggravated felons. It is only murderers and rapists and other violent criminals, those who have committed aggravated felonies and have re-entered the country illegally. And so what the Democratic Party is attempting to do, what the Democratic leader attempted to do, is to suggest that incarcerating illegal immigrants who are murderers and rapists is somehow maligning or impugning immigrants. To the contrary, it is targeting violent criminals. And I do not believe the millions of legal immigrants who followed the rules, like my father did, are in any way swept into a law that is targeting aggravated felons. Aggravated felons is a discrete category, and had Kate's Law passed 5 years ago, Kate Steinle would still be alive today.
If I might respond, I think then you're a member of the Judiciary Committee. I'm a member of the Judiciary Committee. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee is on the floor. That's something we ought to take a look at. I haven't reviewed the case law, I don't think ever on this specific point. I would like an opportunity to do so. But what I really bristle to is the extreme rhetoric and throwing everybody into the same basket as somebody who is a violent criminal. Because the immigrants that I know in California, by and large, are not violent criminals. They're family people. They sustain the #1 agricultural industry in America. They work hard. They pay their taxes. They get in line for legalization. And they're good citizens. And our economy is better for it, not worse for it. So I don't want to impugn everybody, which your broad sweeping language candidly does.
With respect, I would note that the only overreaching rhetoric that has been heard on this floor has come from the Democratic leader, suggesting somehow that targeting violent criminals is targeting all immigrants. It is worth noting, Kate's law addresses only aggravated felons. And so the senior senator from California's suggestion that we should not assume aggravated felons are criminals is a statement that on its face makes no sense. They are, by definition, it is only the violent criminals, the aggravated felons this is targeted to. I will say I'm encouraged, though, that the senior senator from California stated she would be interested in the Judiciary Committee taking this up. As she noted, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee is here. There is unanimous support on the Republican side of the aisle, and it would truly be significant if the senior senator from California were willing to join with Republicans in targeting actual aggravated felons, which is what Kate's law does. She says she doesn't want overheated rhetoric. The rhetoric has been coming from the Democratic side. What I have been saying is we should not be releasing violent criminal illegal aliens. That is a common sense proposition that the overwhelming majority of the American people agree with. Let me also